We are up to the Mishnah of Samar Zayin, Amid Aleph, and basically the Gemara, this entire parak is very technical. We're wondering when you sell property and you give it a name, what's actually included in that sale and what's excluded from that sale. And it's less a halachic question and more a question of what are people's intentions when they write these things. What do they mean? What do they intend when they said the house, the court, the yard, the city? What do they mean by all that? The bathhouse. And the problem is either we ask the vendor and the purchaser have two different ideas of what the intention was, or as some Rishonim say, we're talking about where the vendor passed away, and now the heirs are the ones that have to are the vendors are the sellers. And what did their father mean? We can't ask anyone. So therefore, we want to know halachically or technically what do these words incorporate. So we are up to the Samach Zayin Amid Aleph. The first thing we learn. Sorry.
What page? Sorry.
Yeah, Samach 67A, the Mishnah.
67.
You're muted.
Yep.
67A1 by the word Mishnah.
Shkoyach.
Okay. And
Yeah.
okay. So we are up to the Mishnah here, and the Rashbam explained at length a couple of days ago that the larger the property that you are selling, the more is included because more things are sort of secondary or ancillary to that, number one. Number two, Rashbam says if you're selling a house in the chutzah, it's quite likely you're just moving to another house in the same courtyard. So anything which is easy to pick up, like anything which is metalton that can be moved, you're more than happy to move them across. If you're selling the entire courtyard, which means you're moving elsewhere, it's a bit further, then you are a bit more careful in what you're going to take along with you. Even metalton, some of them you're going to leave behind, things which are directly relate to the thing that you sold. And then if you get to a city, which means you're moving far away, you're practically taking nothing with you. That's the logic, the true logic behind it. Says the Mishnah. If somebody sells a yard, now what's included when you sell the courtyard? What's included? Now normally a chutzah has a couple of houses in it. And am I just selling the yard, the open space itself, or am I also including the houses and so on? You sell a yard, mochar, you sell with it botim, the houses that find themselves, because in a chutzah you have more than one bias. All the houses in that courtyard are included, boires, shichin, umayres, and so too the three kinds of wells that you have, a boy which is round, or a shiach which is rectangular, or with a myra which has a cover on it. They're all included with it. Interesting. Sometimes the Rashbam says that this boyer and sheikh myra are actually are inside the house. Sometimes they're outside the house. But regardless, they're necessary for the house because you need to drink to sustain yourself. But what's not included is avaloyas and metalton. You definitely did not include the metalton. They're not included. But if he added the clause, everything that's in there, so then we say that even things which are metalton, if they're directly related to the house, they're all included in the sale. But regardless, whether he added that clause or whether he did not add that clause, you did not sell loy es hamerchas. The bathhouse is not considered subordinate at all to the courtyard, and the loy es beis habachav, and nor is the olive press included in it as well, because it's totally extraneous to that, and it has independent significance, and therefore it's not included in the sale unless you highlight that. Rabbi Lezer says, Rabbi Lezer argued with everything we just said. He said a chutzah is the open space. You don't include the houses and let alone everything else, just the open space. And the Gemara will explain. We learned. If somebody sells a courtyard, mochar botim hachitzonim ubotim hapnimim. You have one house behind the other house. So both houses, the outer house, the inner house, they're all included in the sale. Ubeis hachuslois. You also sell the base chuslois. What's a base chuslois? The Rashbam and some Rishonim learn interestingly, it is let's say sand, that from the sand you can produce glass. We had in the first period in Shabbos how there's white glass is special glass, and the sand is very significant. The sand is very chashuv. So that sand, Beis HaChosais, you might have thought it's not included because it's so significant. It's not just ordinary sand. Nevertheless, it's included in the sale. So we're talking about over here, for those who just joined, that if you sell a courtyard, what's included in the sale and what's not included in the sale. And we said that generally what's included in the sale are the houses and things which are attached, but not portable things, unless you add the clause, kol mashe b'teicha. But the merchitz, the bathhouse, is not considered part of the chutz. It's independent altogether. And so to the olive press. So now we're learning the brayso. The brayso, you sell the chutzah, you sell all the houses there. You also sell the sand, even though it might be very significant sand. You produce glass out of that. Chanuyos, the stores, psuchas l'toicha, those stores that are open to the chutzah, which means it's basically primarily or only sells to the people in the chutzah, is nimkaras ima. They're all included in the sale. But if she'ain psuchas l'toicha, not open to the chutzah, ain nimkaras ima. It's not sold with it. It's not sold with it. Others learned that the Rambam learns, and other Bnei Gershom, that chuslois is actually a rock. It's a boulder in the chutzah, and it's used to put their clothes on to dry. Nothing to do with sand. And nevertheless, even though it's significant in its own right, it's included in the sale. Then the Gemara continues. What about psucha lekan? What about if this store has two doors, one to the chutzner and one to the outside to the public? So is it included in the sale or not? So we say nimkaras ima. Yes, it is sold with the chutzner. Rabbi Lezer says hamoichir es hachotzer loimochar ela milusa shel chutzner. You sell a courtyard. The only thing you sell is the open space of the chutzner, nothing else. But now the Gemara explains the argument. First, you say that it's open to both, to the chutzner and to the public. It is sold with it, but the Hatani Rabchi learns in his Tosefta, in his Bryce, says Einim Karasim. It's actually not sold with it. Are they arguing? It's not an argument at all. It depends. Who are the main, users of this store? If it's mainly the people in the chutzah, then it's considered part of the chutzah. But if most of the users of that store are the people in the public, then it does not form part of the chutzah. Omar Rava says we can say as follows: two versions as to what we have. Three words that can mean a chutzah: a dirata, or a dira, but we'll call that's an Aramaic version of chutzah, or darta, which is another version of chutzah, and then chutzah, a yard. So now the word diras, it's obvious, comes from the word dira, which means a place that you live in. So if you refer to your courtyard that you were selling as a dirasa, then obviously you were selling the houses as well, a place to live. So it says Rav, dirasa, you use that word dirasa to express yourself in the sale, but surely it means houses. He pligi, the argument here is the amalei darta. You use the term darta. And darta is a word that was used for a chutzah. So Mar Savar Tabitza Mashma. Rabbi Lezer holds that it means a garden, the open space. And Mar Savar Boti Mashma. And the other one holds it means houses. So at this stage right now, it sounds like if he would have said, I'm selling you a chutzah, there's no question, all he's selling is the open space. If he would have said dirasa, no question he's selling the house. The problem is he used the word darta. Darta is the Aramaic interpretation of the word chutzah. So because he used the word darta, do we say, well, it's a chutzah, so it's only the open space, like Rabbi Lezer? Or do we say, because he used the word darta, which the origin, the root of that word is dira, so possibly you incorporate the house as well. That's the argument. That's the first version of Rabbi. However, the second version is even if you use the word darta, since the root of that word, the mocker of the shorish of that word is dira, it's a house. You actually use the word chatzah. So Mar Saba, one of them holds chatzah avira mashma. Chatzah means avir, means open space. Mar Savar, almost no. Where do you find the word chatzar in the Torah? You find it by the Mishkan. Kichatzar Mishkan. And what do we know that's inside the chatzar Mishkan? You have the kodesh, you have the kodesh kadoshim, you have rooms. So we see the word chatzar includes the house. That's the version of the Rashbam and others. Abbeinu Geshem and other Rishonim, actually the version is exactly the opposite. Do we say that chatzar means only open space, just like the Mishkan? Because the chatzar, that he said that's not called chatzar, that's called kodesh kadoshim, that's called the Mishkan. The chatzar of the Mishkan, basically all it has is a mizbeach, and the mizbeach is not a place where you reside. So chatzar actually means only open space. If you want to associate it with the Mishkan, that's how the Beit Geshem and others learn. Says further, Rabba said, name Rab Nachman, what happens if Mochal he sold him chulsis, which I told you according to the Rambam means it's boulder, and according to the Rashbam it means a special sand. Or umitzula, if he sold him a mitzula is like, according to the Rashbam, is like a riverbed. And according to Rambam and Rabbeinu Geshem, it's just an ordinary field or garden. So you sold them two things, a chulsis and a mitzula. So even though they're both being bought from the same vendor, they're very different uses. They're very different uses. If it's a boulder, it's for putting clothes to dry, and the garden is for planting, or fields for planting. If it's a riverbed versus the sand that you use to make glass, again, very different uses. So if you made a chazak in the chulsis like kana mitzula, you're not acquiring the mitzula. We're not talking about the chazaka of 3 years that you use to support your claim. We're talking about over here a kinyan chazaka. One of the 3 methods of being kind of property is through chazaka. We learned before, you have to fix the door, you have to dig a hole, you have to do something with the item itself. And we learned also, by a ger, we clearly said you made a chazaka on one field, you're not automatically kind of the other field. But if you're buying from somebody 10 fields, you made a chazaka on one field, you will be kind of all the other fields. But the Gemara qualifies that by saying only if you paid for all the fields. So therefore, if you paid for all the fields and then you make one kinyan, it's kind of all of them. If you paid only for half the fields, you're only kind of half the fields. The obvious question is, when you buy a field, there's 3 kinyanim, and one of them is kesef shtar chazaka. So if you paid for the fields already, why do you even have to make a chazaka? So we already said before that Rava said that in Mark Sub, Rava says that if you if you live in a city where the custom is we don't rely on money, we rely on a shtar, then we have either a shtar or the option of chazaka. Money does not make the kinyan, but money gives the confidence to the vendor that allow you to make a kinyan in one and make kind of the rest. So that's what we're talking about over here. So if you made it, because they're so different from each other, if you made a chazak in the chulsis, whatever the chulsis is, like kana mitzula, you're not kind of the mitzula. Hechz be mitzula, like kana chulsis. So it's not so, it's not so. How much will Shmuel tell us? Mochaloi esesadas. If a vendor sells someone 10 fields, be'esemedinas, 10 different countries. Kivan shehechzik ba'achazman. Once you made a chazak kinyan in one of them, kana kulan, you're kind of them all as long as you paid for them all. Says the Gemara Hassan, who there's different. You know why? If you're kind of one field, the other ones could have very similar uses. Sadna da'ara chadu. The entire envelope of the world is all one. All the land in the world is contiguous to each other. If it's beneath the water, above the water, it doesn't matter. They're all connected. And therefore, if you make a kinyan in one part of it, you kind of the rest. The kula chada tashmishnu, plus they all have the same purpose. They're all fields for growing and planting. Here they have separate uses, the sand to make a glass, here's a riverbed, there are other things, and therefore they're totally different from each other. And the riverbed is used as Mom says, to mine for gold. So it's a different purpose altogether, like in Ballarat. And according to the Rambam and others, the mitzvah is a regular field, but a regular field is for planting versus the chulsis, which is the boulder where you place clothes to dry. So 2 different uses, it doesn't work. That's one version. The other version is Amar Rav Nachman. Yes, you are kind of. So and this version, when it's shit, of course you're kind of. Doesn't Shmuel say if they're all that you're kind of one? If you're buying 10 fields, you're kind of one, you're kind of all. So we answer no. I would have thought Hosimo decided that Chadu it's all one, it's one big envelope. The world is all everything's connected, interconnected. I would have thought that separate uses that doesn't work. Kamash Malan that it does. So the obvious question that some of the Shem ask is: so why didn't Shmuel say a bigger chiddush? Not only 10 fields, you buy one, you're kind of 10. He should have said you buy two things, 2 fields, or 2 things. If one is a chulsis and one is a mitzula, you're kind of them both. Would have been a far greater chiddush, and automatically we would know if you buy 10 fields, you make a kinyan on one, you're kind of all 10. Why does the Shmuel limit his din to 10 fields? So therefore, they're mechadish. There's a big difference between the case of Shmuel buying fields and the case of the chulsis and the mitzula. And that is that in the case of the 10 fields, as he said, 10 different countries. That's the chiddush. They're disparate fields, far away from each other, and yet make one kinyan as kind of. In the case of the chutz and the mitzvah, because they have different uses, they actually have to be contiguous to each other for this kinyan to be effective. So there's different halachas, and Shmuel's main chiddush was esa medinas, esa sadas be'esa medinas. Make a kinyan one, you're gonna, and that does not work when it comes to the items which have different uses altogether.
Why would you have a havamina that you buy 10 fields? They're not koina, whether they're here or there. What difference does it make?
Chazak. And
Michael, we're losing you. I can't hear you. Anybody else having problems?
Can't see him, can't hear him.
Yeah,
Oh.
we've lost him.
We lost you.
He's frozen.
I'll come back.
You're frozen in time.
Somebody should call him.
He's probably dialing back
Yeah.
on his phone also. He normally dials back on his phone.
Okay, Simon, I think you better take over.
I thought, Brian, you take over.
I was going to say the same thing. I was, you beat me to it, Alex, and you beat me to it, Brian.
We might have to wait a little
Oh,
while.
he's back. He looks like
Do we
he's
give a
coming.
vote?
Remodel, you there?
Yeah, he's back. He's back.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
We can,
You
we
hear
can
me?
right
Okay.
now.
Okay, regarding your question, Alex,
Yeah.
because by a ger that the property is ownerless and he has 2 properties he left behind, and you make a kinyan on one of them, you're not koina the other property, because a chazaka is sort of, you would think, is only associated with the property that you're showing ownership. How are you showing ownership? Because I'm making a kinyan, I'm making a chazaka on this property. How do I show ownership on the next property? How? In fact, how does it work? It only works because there's a vendor. It's not the kinyan that's working, it's the vendor. And it's das acheres makna, there's somebody else who is selling. In fact, there's we mentioned once before, there's a whole discussion. Who is the primary transfer when it comes to a kinyan? Is it the vendor or the buyer? Because there's 2 ways of learning, and the one way of learning is that the vendor is the one who makes the main kinyan, the fact that he releases it, and the buyer just has to show acceptance. And therefore we say, in the case of 10 fields, because there's a seller, and the seller is interested in selling all the 10 properties, and he received his money, so he's happy to sell all 10 properties, all you need to do is show a modicum of interest in becoming the new owner, and that's sufficient. And therefore, if you make a chazak in one field, it's good enough for the rest. But when there's no seller, you're doing the entire kinyan. How in the world is a kinyan on one field going to help you for another field? What kinyan did you make on another field? Why should it work? So that's Shmuel's chiddush. That in itself is Shmuel's chiddush. That there's a vendor, and the vendor does it all.
Okay, that makes sense. Now I
Okay.
understand.
Good. The others who learn that the buyer does it all needs explanation, as you just asked. Okay, the Gemara continues. The Mishnah. If somebody sells an olive press, mochar now in an olive press, the way the Rashbam explains, there are different stages. First, you take the olives and you put them in the mortar there and you crush them. then you grind them, and then you place it into the vat where you have this whole operation there, where you have these boards. Well, the Mishnah will go through each one of these items. You have these boards that are sitting on top of the grapes in the vat, and then on top of the boards you have this beam that comes and presses on the thing. You have a screw that's on top of that beam that pushes up and down that beam, and then you have two walls on the side, which we're going to call psulos, because they're like twins, and that's the whole modus operandi. And the question is, some of those parts are basically portable, they're movable, and some of them are there all the time. So the question is, what's sold and what's not sold? If you didn't add the words kol mashe b'toiche, which obviously is much more inclusive, you just said, I'm selling you the olive press. So what's included in the sale of the olive press? So you sell the vat itself. You sell the vat. According to the Rambam, yam actually means something else. At least by the Maggid Mishnah, so the Rambam, it means the boulder that you put the olives on, and then you use the crusher to crush it. It's that boulder. But most of the time, learn that yam is like a sea. It's the vat. Okay, it's the vat. As a mama, the Gemara explains what that is. As psulos, which are the walls. We'll talk about that in a minute. What you did not sell is the avidim. Those are the boards on the bottom, because they're boards. They can be moved around. It's a galgal, which is the wheel that lifts up and down, which over here, some say means that big screw that we talked about. Others say maybe they had a hoist or something, it's lifted. The esakoira, and that main beam, as we'll talk about in 1 minute. But if he added another clause, he said, the whole everything that's in there, had a kul, then they're all sold.
Would that be obvious?
Yeah, but some things are not, as we'll see anymore. Rabbi Lezer says, he argues, he says that the beam plays such an essential role in this whole thing, even though the beam can be taken off or on, it's considered, when you say Beis Abad, that's what you mean. You mean also that beam. Okay, says the Gemara, yam, what's a yam? Yam is talafcha. Talafcha literally means a lentil. So Traces in the Rambam, they explain that it's shaped like a lentil. It's round. So that's what the vat looked like, a lentil. And according to the Rambam, the stone that they used to put the olives on to get crushed was round as well. So that's what it means. Rab Abba Bar Mamal says, Mamal, what's a mamal? Rab Abba Bar Mamal says, you know what a mamal is? Mefarchata. That was what they crushed the initial grapes, like the mortar they used to crush the initial grapes. That's what a mamal is. And what's psulos? These were the walls on the two sides made out of a cedar tree. That they would place the koira on top of that. That's what they had the beam. What happened was they had two planks on both sides, and they would have a beam going through these two planks. And that beam was sort of fixed in there, and inside the beam, through that beam they put this big screw, and this screw then had a board on the bottom of it, and a board on the bottom of it, and that board on the bottom would press down on the boards. With many horizontal boards there, or vertical boards that used to push down to I guess press the olives and to extract the oil. So that's what the psulos are, and these are sold with it. What they did not sell with it is the avidim. They did not sell the avidim. The Gemara says, "What's avidim?" Avidim is kafshi. They did not sell the avidim, which is kafshi. What's kafshi? These are the boards that we said that are on the bottom, and they easily can be moved. They weren't fixed or anything else. These are boards that are just lying there loose on top of all the grapes and olives, and they were able to what do you call it? And that got pressed down. That was in between the beam and the olives, and therefore these boards are so easy to move. They're not sold with it. And galga was galga. Galga is that screw, the wheel. We call it a wheel, but the chumrah says that's that screw. And the koida is that beam that presses down on these boards. And these things are not sold. Koida is koida. These things are not sold. According to Rabbi Lezer, the koida, even though you can easily remove it, it's so essential to this whole base of bad functioning that's automatically included in the sale. Tana Rabbanan, we learned in a brisa hamoiche base of bad. If somebody sells an alapress, mochad, he sells es hanasorim, he sells the boards, the es hayakovim. Here it says he sells the boards, es hayakovim, he sells them, like we had before, the es hamafrechos, and he has the things that actually crush the olives, and the es harechayim hatachtonis. We learned before the bottom part of the mill, that wheel is permanent, fixed in the ground. You put it there. That comes off on and off, and you lend it to people. Because if you say it and everything that's inside there, then everything is sold. But a benkach or benkach, even you say kol mashe loy mocha, you did not sell loyasa avirim, not like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said if you said kol mashe b'toicha, it includes those boards. He says no, loy mocha avirim does not include the boards, and the loyasa sakin, nor the sacks or v'loyas matzufin, these leather sacks that they would use to transport the olives there in the first place. That is so sort of extraneous to the olive press, because it has other uses as well, these sacks, that it doesn't get included with it, even if you just added that word kol mashe b'toicha. You do sell the beam, even though it's easily removed. It's not called a base abad. The only reason why it's called a base abad is because you have that beam. I mean, it's pivotal to the whole the functionality of this base abad. Otherwise, what's the base abad? Not doing anything.
It's like Harvey selling a car with no wheels. It's stickle useless.
Maybe, yeah, might be a
You
good
can buy one
analogy.
of those as well, Alex.
Okay. Now, not everyone agrees that Nesarim are the boards that I told you before. That means for the Brisa then argues the Mishnah, which are many poskim that hold, or Rishonim that hold, that it does argue with the Mishnah. So the Rashbam wants to learn that when we say over here Nesarim boards, we're not talking about the boards that I said to you before, which the Mishnah says are sitting on top of the olives. But Rashbam learned the boards are sitting inside the vat to make sure that the juice, the oil, doesn't escape. So therefore, they have inside the vat, they have these boards that retain that oil there. That therefore, according to Brisa, is sold with it, and the Mishnah is not talking about that, referring to it at all. So there's no argument in the Mishnah of Brisa, other than showing the way I told you, and the Mishnah of Brisa are arguing. Next case. Now you're selling a bathhouse. You're selling a bathhouse. So what's included in the bathhouse is now a bathhouse, as the Rashbam explains here, and we had in Gemara Shabbos and other places. We had issues where you're allowed to say Hashem's name Shalom, where you're not allowed to say Hashem's name Shalom. So in the bathhouse, you have 3 chambers, 3 rooms. The inner room is obviously where the bathhouse is, and everybody there is naked. The outer room is where you're totally dressed, and the middle room is where you get undressed. So the middle room is the one that's sort of in between. And, all kinds of laws about what you could do, what you can't do. The outer room is, everyone's fully dressed, so the laws there are very different. So if you sell, what do you call it? A bathhouse, the planks of wood that you place on the ground are not included. They were placed, planks were in the ground because the ground used to get hot. As Rabbeinu Gershom adds, they used to have marble floors in the bathhouse. And when they heat up the water, the marble becomes hot. So they place pieces of wood on the marble that you shouldn't, that your feet shouldn't get, burnt. Or you shouldn't get all dirty from the mud. Or you don't want to spread bacteria, which neither of them say, but we just added that in. And so too, the es hasafolim, these are the big jugs that you have the water to use to wash and everything else. So they are sold with it. They're not sold with it because it's so. Anything which is metalton, that's a general rule. Anything which is easy to be removed is not sold with it. There's havlonius, which can either be the curtain that they would have separating one room from the next, or it means literally towels. So that's not included in the sale. If he tells him who, just like when you go to mikveh, you pay an annual fee. Most places the towels are not included. The separate item altogether. He tells him if he says, I'm selling you the bathhouse and everything that's included, again, that's an extra clause. What did he come to add? He's adding all of these things that we just said are not included, including the towels and so on. Benkach or benkach, but either way, he does not sell. If you have, let's say, creeks of water or ponds of water out there that you use to fill up the bathhouse, since the ponds of water has other uses as well, not just for your bathhouse. Or if you have, warehouses for the wood to heat up the bathhouse, but people use wood to heat up their homes, so it has other uses as well. It never becomes subordinate or ancillary to the bathhouse. It's never included in the sale, even if you use the word kol mashe b'teichen. Okay, says the Gemara first. What have we learned? You sell a bathhouse as base hanasorin, but the house that stores these planks of wood. We said before, the planks of wood themselves are not sold, but the house that stores it, that house is there to support the bathhouse, so it's included in the sale, and it's included in that. There's bays how you come in, and the same thing is that's the house that keeps all of these jugs, all of these barrels, or bases, whatever it is that you have there. It's included. That's what it's for. However, the Rashbam has another interesting shot. He says, base how you come in is they use, because it's so hot and they sweat, they used to put like a band around their forehead to absorb all that sweat, like a sauna. They would absorb all that sweat. And this was the house that housed them. So the house itself is included in the sale because that's what its purpose is, to support the bathhouse. So it's base how you come in, and so too there's base hasafolim. That's the house that has some say safolim is actually chairs, safsolim. It is, the Rashbam brings as chairs that they sit there in the base hamerchetz. Or others say it's the house that kept all of these jugs. And avoloi, but not in the sari matzman. You said before, the boards themselves are not included because they can move easily. V'loi you come in atzmon, and not to these. According to Rashbam, it means these bands that they wore around the head to absorb the sweat. And v'loi safoli matzmon, not the benches or not these jugs, as we said before. V'loi is atzmon, the towels or this curtain. Included. But a bekach, neither way, the ponds that they use, the dams that they use to support the water, that is not included because it has so many other uses as well. Whether it's in the rain season where there's plenty of water, even in the summer when there's very little water. So you would have thought that there's very little water, definitely it becomes ancillary to the bathhouse. No, it doesn't. It never becomes ancillary because it has other uses as well. It does not become buckle or secondary to the bathhouse. Yeah. There's a machlekes rishonim. What happens if there's not sufficient water in these brichas to support the bathhouse? You need other supports as well. What happens then? So according to some rishonim, in that case, then that water does become ancillary to the bathhouse and so with it. And others say, definitely not. It always retains an independent existence and it's not included in the sale. Then he said, "V'loy base kinos eitzim, nor the place where you hold the wood, because wood has other uses as well." If instead of saying kol mashe b'toicha, he said kol mashe, everything that's there to support the bathhouse. That's a whole different story. Kulam mechuri, then everything is sold, because the fact of the matter is the water supports it. The fact of the matter is the wood supports it, and all of these things. And all of these things are included when you say kol tashmisha. A person was sold this bread. Beis habad, I'm selling you this olive press, but instead of saying kol mashe b'toicha, he said v'chol tashmisha v'ani moichla. I'm selling you everything that is necessary for the olive press. Have hanechan vasa. So he had these stores that the primary purpose of that store is to sell bread and wine. Avroid on the outside, but they also used sometimes the store. They used to spread out. They had the space there. They would spread out the poppy seeds so that the sesame seeds, so that it should dry, and then later they would bring it into the Beis Habad, like crushed olive, but also crush these seeds to produce oil. So this store had other uses, but also for that. And the question is it called, when you sold the Beis Habad, did you sell the store with it or not? Also, clearly, anything which is there to use in the Beis Habad is included. Well, since you use the store partially, at least, to support the Beis Habad by laying out there the sesame seeds to dry up, then it should be included. Amalei Abai, of course, Abai can't let him go, and he's relentless. But Tani Rab Chia told us, Rab Chia learned in the Braisa, Ein Kulam Chuna, not so. So Yosef walked away. A couple of generations, the next generation, as we know, the Gemara in Gittin said that when Rava passed away, Rav Ashi was born, and Rashi learns over there that Rav Ashi was born on the very day that Rava passed away. So there's no way that Rav Ashi was part of the discussion. We had it very often that Abai and Rava would have a discussion, and then Rav Ashi would come in. Obviously, when they were revising the whole Gemara, like we learned in Sechel Poilim, Rav Ashi then added his opinion, and the halacha usually like Rav Ashi. Elo Rav Ashi, Chazinan we see. If you use the following words, I'm selling you the olive press. And I'm selling you also everything that's there to support the olive press. And then he added, but then the store would not be included. But he added the Eilen Mitzrana, and these are the boundaries. Then Kana, you are Kana. Because we had before, sometimes we say that when you add boundaries which are wider than the area that you're selling, we say that no Mitzarim Hirchavla. You just use it because convenience, but it's not that you actually sold you sold it. But in this case over here, he said, I'm selling you everything with it. He said, I'm selling you, it's not just Kol. If you said Kol Masha B'Toich, I'm selling you the Beis Habad, everything in it, and these are the boundaries, then we're going to apply the rule, B'Tzarim Hirchavla. I just added these boundaries. I don't mean anything. I'm not very pedantic. I'm not very particular. But if you said the Chol Tashmisha, you said everything that is there to support it, and then you still added the Elaine Mitzvah, these are the boundaries, then we say that you actually meant to include the store if it's within those boundaries. The Rashbam brings another pshat that it depends if you say the Elaine Mitzvah at the end or if you say the Elaine Mitzvah at the beginning, but he doesn't make an issue of it at all. He doesn't make a difference. The fact that you added it in, the Elaine, these are the boundaries. According to the Rambam, even if you didn't say the word these are, you just said the boundaries included these boundaries, and it's not the word these, it's just included, but you just mentioned boundaries. That's good enough to say that the store is included. Okay, have a Shavuot Tov, everybody, a good vach. We'll see you next time in Mitzvah Shem.